ever and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
The Israel-Hamas war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage. Tonight, what Israeli troops say they found after raiding a Gaza hospital. Then, after months of tensions, Biden meets with Chinese President Xi. Will there be a breakthrough? And while turkey costs have gone down, which other Thanksgiving staples have gone up? On the CBS Evening News.
We have to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict. And we also have to manage it responsibly.
No drama, no delay, no government shutdown. That's our goal.
The date of the New Hampshire First in the Nation presidential primary will be January 23rd. That date complies with our state statute.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. President Joe Biden is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in California tonight as tensions grow in multiple regions around the globe. It is certainly a high-stakes meeting that is months in the making. President Biden meeting with the leader of a government he often describes as a rising threat to U.S. economic interests at home and to international stability. All this while in Washington, the House is already on Thanksgiving break after passing a funding bill to keep the government open. Now it heads to the Senate, with leadership promising a vote ASAP. We'll head to the Hill in a moment, but we begin tonight with CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, we really appreciate you being here. Let's begin by listening to President Biden in his remarks on today's meeting.
I value our conversation because I think it's paramount that you and I understand each other clearly, leader to leader, with no misconceptions or miscommunication. We have to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict, and we also have to manage it responsibly.
And Weijia, let's also hear from the Chinese leader.
For two large countries like China and the United States, turning their back on each other is not an option. It is unrealistic for one side to remodel the other, and conflict and confrontation has unbearable consequences for both sides.
You've been reporting on all of this. What does it mean, based on your conversations with diplomats and White House officials?
Well, Robert, the most important outcome of this meeting for President Biden is going to be if the two leaders reestablish communication, especially with regard to the U.S. and Chinese military. And as we heard from both of these leaders, they actually agreed that they have to find a way to coexist, to compete with one another, but they do not want to cross over a line into conflict or confrontation. And there has been escalation of that we have been observing in the past year. These two leaders have not spoken, even on the phone, in the past year because the relationship has grown so rocky. And we know that President Biden, he is a man who craves FaceTime. He wants to be in front of the people who he is trying to sway, who he's trying to hash out a deal with. And that's why this meeting is so important, not to mention the fact, Robert, that every decision that has to do with China, in China, has to go through Xi Jinping. And so there are certain things that must be decided, that can only be decided if these two men sat together face to face, which is what they've been doing now for well over 2 hours. And so even getting to this point required so much intense diplomacy from members of the president's cabinet to negotiate this summit that we're watching unfold right now.
Weijia, what are the expectations about what's next?
Well, we do expect there to be some sort of a nod that they will resume communications, especially with the military. And you might remember that when then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi traveled to Taiwan in August of 2022, it enraged Beijing. And that's when Chinese officials in the military essentially went dark. And we saw that on full display when the U.S. shot down a spy balloon this year in February. And Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin tried to get his counterpart on the phone, and there was no answer. So when you're talking about increased military activity in the South China Sea amid fears that China could invade Taiwan and how the U.S. would play a role in that, communication is key. So we expect that. We also think there will be an announcement that these two nations have found a way to crack down on fentanyl. Essentially, sources say that the way to do that is by targeting exports from China that are ingredients that make their way to the southern border, ingredients made to use fentanyl and then flood the United States, which of course is an issue that is so important to many Americans.
Weijia Jiang, we always appreciate your reporting. Thank you. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is pushing to pass a bill to avert a government shutdown. The House passed Speaker Mike Johnson's two-step spending plan on Tuesday, but the Speaker relied on Democratic lawmakers to get it over the finish line. 93 Republicans voted against it, and today the House failed to advance a separate spending bill after a group of conservatives revolted. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. Scott, what a back and forth. What next?
For those looking for it and listening for it, there are warning sirens flashing and blaring about January 19th. A government shutdown isn't just a possibility, but the prospects are increasingly likely based on what's gone on over the past 24 hours here. A protracted government shutdown as Republicans revolt against their own legislation as they come unbound on key votes involving spending, involving funding the government. And as it's become clear, Bob, especially today, that the new House Speaker Mike Johnson may have used up his honeymoon period just getting the bill passed to keep the government open through January and February. There's going to be a reckoning come January with members of the Freedom Caucus who want significant cuts, significant budget cuts and policy changes in the next deal, something that will not win support from the Democrats in the Senate. An impasse is coming. Take a listen to one of those Freedom Caucus members who has been most strident as the evening began, Chip Roy in Texas.
Let's be very clear about what's going on. We set out this year to change the way this place works. We wanted to change the rules. We wanted to restore regular order. We wanted to get to the place where the people's voice can be heard, regardless of whether you're in leadership or not.
There's been an acknowledgement, even from his critics of this bill, that the Speaker, Mike Johnson, had little choice with so little time. But one of these Freedom Caucus members told me, and another conservative from Georgia told me, they're not sure why he pressed forward with this bill with no Republican gains when they had the leverage of that Friday government shutdown deadline. This is going to be a thing in January.
January, Scott, you've made that very clear. We're all going to be watching what happens in the coming weeks and months. But before then, Senate Democrats will have to consider what was recently passed by the Republican House of Representatives, along with Democratic support to get that done. Let's listen to what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say.
No drama, no delay, no government shutdown. That's our goal, and we hope we have an agreement very soon. To avoid a shutdown with no cuts in vital programs and no poison pills is a very good solution for the American people.
Scott, one, what do you expect the vote in the Senate to be on what was just passed out of the House? And what has the Senate gained, if anything, in terms of leverage for those further negotiations down the road?
Yeah, the percentages are going to look pretty similar, Bob. You're going to see a near overwhelming, if not unanimous, amount of support from Democrats, just like you saw in the House. You'll see that fracture inside the Republican conference, a split, just like you saw in the House, where there are some Republicans, but not all Republicans. What leverage has been gained? Well, we asked that question to a number of senators today, and it was Hawaii Senator Mazi Hirono who told us she thinks this is momentum moving toward the Democrats for the next standoff because something so clean came out of Republicans in the U.S. House. No budget cuts, not just a few, no budget cuts. No policy riders, not just a few, but none. There is a momentum Democrats think they're gaining, and Republicans are, to put it mildly, Bob, restive and unsettled by that. That's what's going to be the foundation of this face-off in a few weeks.
Scott, what do you expect in terms of a possible government shutdown should it happen in January. Are there any preparations being made?
Well, the federal government made preparations, the ancillary preparations for one this week, just like they did the last week of September. They've gone through a playbook that has become well-worn over the last few years. But you got to remember how this is broken into two, Bob. 1/3 of the government is funded through January 19th. The other 2/3, which includes the Pentagon and vital homeland security, is funded through February, which, according to people with whom we're speaking today on the Hill, means they may be more inclined to breach that first one, which would impact transportation, veterans and military construction programs, agriculture programs, and that defense one's a little more sacrosanct later.
Scott McFarlane on top of everything on Capitol Hill. We really appreciate it, Scott. Thank you. More than 90 House Republicans voted against the bill to keep the government funded. We analyzed the potential political ramifications for the new speaker. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, my good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. Yeah, it's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
When are my Republican colleagues going to put up or shut up? I didn't come here for second place. I didn't come here for more excuses. I didn't come here to have the Speaker of the House assume the position and in 17 days pass a continuing resolution off the floor of this House through suspension of the rules.
Calm times on Capitol Hill. Welcome back to America Decides. That was Texas Republican Congressman Chip Roy, who was one of the 93 Republican House members to oppose Speaker Johnson's bill to avoid a government shutdown. Sabrina Rodriguez and Kadia Goba join us now. Sabrina is a national political reporter for the Washington Post. Kadia is a political reporter for Semaphore. Thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it. So there's a lot of fallout on Capitol Hill based on Speaker Johnson's decision to move forward with this particular legislation. we'll begin with you. What's the political cost, if any, for the new speaker?
I mean, for the new speaker, you know, the fact is at least he has a future now. He did this. We've averted a government shutdown at the moment. But, you know, he worked with Democrats for this. He got the votes from Democrats. And what does that cost him with the more ultra-conservative side of his own party? And, you know, as we head to January, we have another battle coming. But at least for now, it's okay. The holidays, Thanksgiving, and that part is handled without having to deal with a shutdown.
Yeah, and these are some of the same concerns that brought a motion to vacate or ousted Kevin McCarthy. So obviously there's concern whether or not the same thing is going to happen with Johnson. But like a piece I wrote earlier today, I think he gets some grace because he has a lot of conservative backing and people just genuinely trust him. Even after the vote yesterday to pass the stopgap, many people said, you know, I don't like this. I don't like the stopgap, but I'm still okay with the speaker, so time will tell. Chip Roy says they're coming back and they're going to fight, so we'll see in a few weeks how that turns out.
Is Congressman Roy angry about the speaker or angry just about the situation? Seems to be a bit of a difference.
It seems like right now it's about the situation. You know, the reality is that Johnson just took the speakership and he doesn't have all the personal baggage and drama that Kevin McCarthy had on the job. So there isn't that level of animus between Johnson and that right flank of the party. Again, it's early. He's only been in this position for, you know, days at this point. So, you know, as time passes is what we'll kind of see where that grace period ends with that right flank of the party.
And are we learning anything about how January is going to look? Scott McFarland was saying that's going to be a pressure point. Is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell building a relationship with the new speaker? Are Senate Republicans in any way simpatico with what's going on in the House?
That's not clear, but I can tell you there is a lot of work to be done. Republicans or Congress in general in the House, they can't even pass these appropriations bills. Remember, the big promise was to get 12 of them over the line. But there's been all kind of angst between now. We see the right flank and the moderates going to bat and opposing some of the rules on these bills. So before they even get to the Senate side for their conference, the House is going to have to pass these out of committee and then off the floor.
Let's turn to the 2024 presidential race. New Hampshire has now set its primary date for late January, but the Democrats still have South Carolina as their first formal primary. Does New Hampshire matter for the Democrats? Dean Phillips, the Minnesota congressman, is running in that race.
Yeah, he's definitely made it a focal point, and he, you know, in his first event in New Hampshire was talking about how, you know, Democrats should keep it in New Hampshire and they should be paying attention to voters in New Hampshire. But what we're seeing is the Biden campaign and administration and you know, Democratic leaders at large saying, well, no, we're going to go with what was agreed with. We're going to go with what the Biden administration wants. I mean, Biden has said he's willing to not be on the ballot in New Hampshire to uphold the schedule that he wanted and endorsed. So at this point, it's a mixed bag of we're seeing, you know, Dean Phillips really leaning in on New Hampshire to send a message in his long shot campaign, but the Biden administration holding on that they're not going to focus as much on New Hampshire.
What about on the Republican side in New Hampshire? Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was in Washington today. He's making a play there. Does he have a chance to make a surprise in New Hampshire and get some traction, or is this really Trump country?
I think it's Trump country. I am surprised. I mean, Chris Christie has been, you know, running as the former or the traditional Republican. We see that doesn't work, and we see this by some of the people that have dropped out, like Pence, like Tim Scott. So I think, I don't know, I'm not really sure what his play is here, but I will point out that I know Hakeem Jeffries and a group of Democrats are going there to New Hampshire for a dinner. So I thought that was interesting because I hadn't noticed that, or I'd seen that in previous presidential runs.
And Congressman Phillips of Minnesota, he's running in the Democratic primary, but President Biden faces challenges from the left, running as independents, Dr. Cornel West, and also Robert F. Kennedy Jr. RFK Jr. has just won some endorsements from some high-profile athletes like Aaron Rodgers and others. Could that have any impact on his campaign, which remains this outsider campaign, independent campaign?
Right now, it appears that Republicans are more concerned about RFK's run. You know, when you look at who his top donors have been, it's historically Republican donors. And in terms of being on the campaign trail and talking to voters, it seems that, RFK's, vax, skeptic, anti-vax messaging resonates more with a Republican Party. And we've even seen, after he announced that he was moving from Democrat to an independent bid, Republicans kind of scrambling and saying, oh, we liked this when it was that he was running as a Democrat against Biden, but now we're kind of worried that we might lose some support.
And there was also some reporting from my colleague Shelby Talcott where Trump's camp is, strategizing around RFK. So I think if they're making a concerted effort, that there's some concern there.
And final thing, quickly from both of you, what's at the top of your notebook? What are you watching for the rest of the week?
It's voter apathy and the exhaustion that we're hearing from voters, whether it's about the government shutdown and it now not happening, but it pending, and kind of hearing them talk about candidates, which I think will be far more than 1 week that we deal with that.
I really want to know how much the fatigue in Congress is impacting members and if they're going to have this appetite to go after Johnson or cut up a little more when they come back after Thanksgiving.
I don't know how many more speaker votes we can do here in Washington. Oh, please. Sabrina Rodriguez and Kadia Goba, thank you very much for being here. The battle over abortion rights is becoming a crucial issue in this campaign season. We'll explore that next. You're streaming America Decides.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high? Where are these coming from?
That's the million-dollar question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking, what's happening in the world? Why is this happening? And how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se.
Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard?
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden is making access to abortion a key pillar of his re-election campaign. And at a fundraiser last night, he said this, quote, "The only reason a fundamental right has been stripped away from the American people for the first time in American history is because of Donald Trump." Those sharp critiques, though, are not keeping former President Trump from sharing his own position on the issue. Here's a new ad. He's running in Iowa.
Trump-nominated conservative judges, leading to Roe v. Wade being overturned and returned to the states. Help make America great again. Caucus for President Trump on January 15th.
Joining us now, CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi and CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. Thank you so much for being here at the table with America Decides. We'll begin with abortion. We just heard from former President Trump and President Biden in their respective remarks. Is this issue front and center on the campaign trail when you're covering the Republican race?
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. This is front and center for not only the Republican candidates, but for voters as well. And sources that I have within Trump's orbit have told me that they understand this is a really difficult issue for him in 2024. As we saw last week in Virginia, voters overwhelmingly rejected any candidates or provisions, especially in Ohio, that would restrict abortion access for people. They flat out rejected it. So Donald Trump knows that, and that's what he's playing to. He kind of has this twofold approach. When he's speaking to GOP voters in the primary, he is their champion. He's boastful. He's the one who overturned Roe versus Wade by appointing justices to the Supreme Court who delivered it back to the people in the states. But when he's talking to more moderate people and reporters, so Univision in his interview last week, he takes this approach of vagueness. He won't say how many weeks he supports. He won't say 15 weeks. He won't say 20 weeks. And it's that vagueness that really scares Democrats and scares Joe Biden. You heard last night what he said about abortion and that Donald Trump is the person who brought it back to the states. He sees that as a winning issue for him in 2024.
It's interesting because he knows perhaps that it's driving out so much turnout for the Democrats, bringing out some non-voters for the Democrats. And speaking of issues that drives turnout, immigration has always been one, especially for former President Trump, in terms of getting working voters to get behind his past campaigns. How is immigration, Camilo, featuring in his campaign this time around? When you closely watch his speeches, what do you notice about the cadence, about the framing of the issue?
Well, certainly former President Donald Trump has made immigration a top campaign issue yet again. He has promised to launch the largest deportation operation in U.S. history, for example, if reelected. He has promised to implement ideological screenings for new immigrants, to deny birthright citizenship to the American-born children of unauthorized immigrants. And he has also refused to rule out reinstating that infamous family separation policy along the U.S.-Mexico border. So it has been a prominent theme again in his campaign. But President Biden's campaign team is telling us now that they see an opportunity here to portray these proposals as draconian, extreme, and radical. And they believe this effort to highlight these proposals, including the mass deportations, will allow them to create some ground here to go on the offensive on this issue, which many perceive to be a political challenge for President Biden due to the record levels of migration along the U.S.-Mexico border and the record numbers of illegal crossings there. And they believe that this effort by Trump to tout this issue will turn off Latino voters and other key voters in 2024, such as moderates and independents. So they're seeking in many ways to flip the script on this issue, but we cannot dismiss the fact that this is one of President Biden's worst polling issues. We had a poll back in September that found that 66% of likely voters disapproved of his handling on immigration, including 71% of Latino voters. And I think that's due to the fact of the situation along the border, but also the fact that many Latino voters feel like he has not taken enough actions on this issue, including to legalize the undocumented population here.
So just in the final minute or two here, when you look at the issue of abortion, speaking of the word script, after what happened in Virginia, you've covered Virginia so much, are Republicans going to start talking less about this on the campaign trail? Have you noticed anything with some of the other candidates beyond Trump?
It'll be interesting to see if they cover it more going forward. It is a losing issue for them, though, and Biden has seized on that.
And they also think it drives turnout on their own side.
They do. They really do.
That's why some of these evangelicals are saying, keep talking about it.
Right.
And they don't like when Trump doesn't talk about it.
No, they don't like when he doesn't talk about it, and they've pushed him, and sources I've spoken to have said that they've pushed him privately to really define where he is on this issue. You know, Governor DeSantis proudly talks about his 6-week abortion ban, or at least did until he realized that it wasn't really playing that well with some voters. So then he backtracked and said, well, you know, I could be for a 15-week federal ban. There's movement on both of them. I really don't think they know what's going to get voters to turn out, or they know where, you know, the electorate kind of feels that they're standing on this issue. So I think that will be something we'll be tracking in the coming weeks and months ahead in the primaries.
We certainly will. And on immigration, what should we be tracking? On the Democrats in particular, in just a minute or so.
A longstanding Democratic Party on this issue has been providing a pathway to U.S. citizenship for Dreamers and other longtime unauthorized immigrants here in the U.S. President Biden has not been able to convince Congress to change the immigration laws and to provide that pathway, and that will continue to be a hurdle for him to overcome, to galvanize those Latinos who obviously he needs in 2024.
Olivia Rinaldi, Camilo Montoya Galvez, we really appreciate you stopping by America Decides, and that does it for us today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key.